All right, so we've got a really interesting set of materials to dive into today, focusing on Argentina between 1943 and 1955.
Oh, yeah, a pivotal period for sure.
Yeah, talk about a turning point in their history. And our main guide for this deep dive is a video by the historian Felipe Pigna.
He paints a vivid picture of that era.
He really does. It sets the scene so well. Now, to understand Peronism, where it came from, how it took hold.
You really have to understand the backdrop.
Exactly. And it seems like the 1930s, a decade often called the infamous decade, is crucial to that backdrop.
Oh, absolutely. To really grasp the rise of Peronism, you got to go back to the 30s in Argentina. It's a decade often, called the infamous decade.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The infamous decade. What was going on that made it so infamous?
It was a time marked by a lot of political instability, think coups, electoral fraud, a real step back for democratic progress.
Yeah, not exactly a shining moment for democracy.
Not at all. And then on top of that, you have the global economic crisis of 1929.
Right, the Great Depression.
Exactly. And that hit Argentina's agricultural exports really hard. So you've got this mix of political instability and economic hardship brewing. Not a good recipe for a happy populace.
No, not at all. It sounds like the perfect breeding ground for some kind of major shift. So how did Argentina respond to this economic crisis? Did they just try to stick with agriculture?
Well, they couldn't. They were forced to change course. They moved towards something called import substitution industrialization.
Okay, break that down for me. Import substitution industrialization.
Basically, it means they started producing goods domestically that they just couldn't afford to import anymore.
So instead of relying on the global market, they turned inward.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. Did this have a major impact on Argentine society?
Oh, a huge impact. This is where you see the rise of a new working class in Argentina. People are migrating from rural areas to the cities to work in factories.
Ah, so the seeds of change are being sown.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. This new working class, they weren't steeped in those traditional leftist ideologies.
Like previous generations.
Right. They were more open to new ideas, new leadership, more susceptible to change, you could say.
Okay, I'm seeing how this is all coming together. So we've got this backdrop, this new working class, and then, bam, June 4th, 1943, a military coup shakes up Argentina.
A pivotal moment.
I'm guessing this wasn't just some random power grab, though, right?
No, not a random power grab at all. The coup brought in a military government, but behind the scenes, there was this group, a secret military lodge called the GOU, pulling the strings.
The GOU?
Yeah, the Grupo de Oficiales Unidos.
A secret military lodge. Okay, now we're talking. So what did the GOU want? Total control.
It was more nuanced than just grabbing all the power.
Yeah.
Pigna highlights their main objectives in his video.
Okay, lay them out for me.
Well, they wanted to end electoral fraud, for one.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they also wanted to promote democratic elections.
Hold on. They staged a coup to promote democratic elections.
It may seem contradictory, but yeah, that was one of their stated goals. They also wanted to maintain neutrality in World War II, reduce foreign influence, and address something they called the social question.
The social question. That sounds pretty vague. What did that actually mean?
It essentially boils down to addressing the needs, the anxieties of the working class.
I see. So they were aware of the potential for unrest.
Oh, absolutely. The GOU was not blind to the fact that this massive new working class, if their needs were ignored, they could be drawn to, well, communism.
That makes sense. So they saw addressing social justice as a way to counter that threat.
Yes, you could say they believed that promoting social justice was a way to keep communism at bay.
So a balancing act, authoritarian rule on one hand, genuine concern for the well-being of the working class on the other.
It's a fascinating dynamic. And to be honest, figuring out their true motivations is one of the big debates about this period.
Right. Were they truly committed to social justice, or was it just about power?
Exactly. History rarely offers easy answers. So we have this complex situation, the GOU pulling strings, a new working class eager for change, and then comes Juan Perón.
Ah, yes, Juan Perón, our main player. Tell me about him.
Well, he was a colonel within the GOU.
So he's right in the thick of things.
Oh, absolutely. And Pigna even describes him as the brains behind the whole operation. But even before his name becomes synonymous with this whole movement, he's an interesting guy.
I'm all ears.
Born in Buenos Aires province, spent part of his childhood down in Patagonia, entered the military young. By this point, he's already a widower, no children. A life marked by both ambition and hardship.
Wow, quite a backstory.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was Perón's role within the GOU initially?
Well, in 1943, he was appointed the head of the Department of Labor.
A pretty important position.
Oh, absolutely. And he quickly transforms it into the Secretariat of Labor and Social Welfare. It became his platform for enacting all the social justice policies the GOU was talking about.
Ah, so he's put in a position to actually make those changes happen. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, as if things weren't dramatic enough, a huge earthquake hits San Juan on January 15th, 1944. This earthquake really was a turning point.
That's right, the San Juan earthquake. It seems like more than just a random natural disaster in this story.
Oh, much more than that. This earthquake becomes a defining moment. But to really get into that, we'll have to save it for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we left off with Argentina reeling from that devastating earthquake in San Juan. It's crazy to think a natural disaster could actually boost someone's political career.
It is, but that's what happened. Perón really seized the opportunity to connect with the people, and not in that typical politician way.
So what did he do differently?
Well, remember, he was already Secretary of Labor and Social Welfare, so he was in a key position. But when the earthquake hit, he didn't just stay in his office, issuing orders from afar. He was right there on the ground, coordinating the relief efforts, making sure that aid reached those who needed it most.
So he was walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. Pignet really emphasizes this point in his video. He says this hands-on approach contrasted sharply with how the old elite typically reacted. They were seen as indifferent.
I can see how that would make an impact. People are suffering, and then this guy, Perón, shows up and shows them he actually cares.
With a powerful image. And it really resonated with the Argentine people, especially the working class. His popularity just skyrocketed.
It's almost ironic, isn't it? A tragedy paving the way for a political rise. But what about the GOU? How did they feel about Perón's growing popularity? I mean, weren't they still the ones pulling the strings?
Well, that's where things get a little messy. The GOU, remember, it wasn't this perfectly unified group. There were factions within it.
Cracks in the facade.
Exactly. And some members, they started to see Perón as a real threat, a potential rival.
They must have been a bit nervous seeing him gain so much support.
They were wary of his ambition, that's for sure. And they definitely didn't like the populist wave he was riding.
It sounds like a power struggle was brewing.
Oh, it definitely was. And not everyone in the GOU was against Perón.
Really?
Yeah, some actually saw his effectiveness, the influence he had, and they thought, hey, maybe we should align ourselves with this guy. Maybe the old way of doing things, well, maybe it was on its way out.
It's like they sensed the winds were changing.
Exactly. So you've got this tension building within the GOU, and then, boom, it explodes in October 1945. A faction opposed to Perón, they orchestrate his arrest, remove him from all his posts.
Talk about a bold move. It seems like a pretty big gamble, though, trying to take down someone so popular.
It was a huge miscalculation. They underestimated Perón's hold on the people, especially the working class and the unions.
So what happened?
Well, his arrest sparked outrage. Massive demonstrations broke out all across the country. People demanded his release. It was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
The GOU's plan totally backfired.
Totally. Workers went on strike. Key industries were paralyzed. The GOU was under immense pressure from all sides.
So what did they do? Did they just cave in?
They had no choice. Faced with this overwhelming show support for Perón, they had to back down. On October 17, 1945, he was released from prison. And that date, it became a landmark moment in Argentine history, celebrated as Loyalty Day by Peronists.
That's an incredible story. The people literally rising up to demand their champion's return. It's like something out of a movie. So how did this whole experience change Perón? Did it, solidify his bond with the working class?
It definitely did. It cemented his image as a man of the people, a symbol of their hopes and aspirations. It showed him and everyone else the power of the people, their ability to challenge those in power.
Okay, so he's free, he's more popular than ever. Does he just waltz back into power?
Well, not quite. The GOU is still technically in control, remember, and elections were scheduled for February 1946. Perón decides to run for president. He puts together this coalition of labor unions, parts of the military that supported him, even a segment of the Catholic Church, a pretty diverse group.
Wow, that's a pretty interesting mix. What was his platform? What was he running on?
He called his platform Justicialismo. It basically emphasized social justice, economic independence for Argentina, and national sovereignty. These themes, they really resonated with people who were, longing for stability, for a fairer future.
So he's tapping into this deep desire for change.
Exactly. He promised to continue the work he started as Secretary of Labor, to protect the rights of workers, to make Argentina a strong, independent nation on the world stage.
That's a pretty compelling message. How did people react to his candidacy?
Well, he was hugely popular with the working class, of course, but he also had a lot of opposition. The traditional landowning elites, industrialists who were afraid of his economic policies, even some in the military who still saw him as a threat. It was a divided nation.
So the stage is set for a crucial election. What happens next? Does Perón succeed in his quest to create this just Argentina? Well, to find out, we'll have to continue this journey into the next part of our deep dive. Okay, so it's 1946, and we're on the edge of our seats here waiting for the election results. Does Perón pull it off?
He does. It's a decisive victory. Perón captures over 50% of the vote.
Wow, a clear mandate from the people.
It really was. This victory ushered in a whole new era for Argentina, one that would be profoundly shaped by his vision, his justicialismo.
Okay, so justicialismo, I'm still a little fuzzy on what that actually means in practice. Like, what did Perón actually set out to do?
Good question. Piña does a good job breaking it down in his video. At its heart, justicialismo aimed to make Argentina more socially just and economically independent.
Got it. So it's about empowering the working class, breaking free from that dependence on foreign economies, and forging this, like, strong national identity.
That's a good summary. Perón wanted to create a system that really shifted the balance of power, not just offer empty promises.
How did he go about doing that? Like, how did he actually empower the working class?
It was a multi-pronged approach, I'd say. He tackled it on a few different fronts. Legally, for one, Perón enacted a whole bunch of labor reforms, established a minimum wage, paid vacations, health insurance.
Wow, some pretty major worker-friendly policies right there.
For the time, they were really radical. He was really looking out for the workers.
I can see why he was so popular with the unions.
Yeah.
But did he get any pushback from, say, business owners or the wealthy elite?
Oh, for sure. There was definitely resistance from the people who were benefiting from the old system.
The status quo.
Yeah. But Perón, he was a smart politician. He was really good at maneuvering through these tricky political waters.
He had a knack for it.
He did. He also really understood the importance of symbolism, of public spectacle.
So it wasn't just about policies. It was about the image, the message.
Right. He and Vita, she played a crucial role, too. They would often address these massive rallies, connecting directly with the working class. Really powerful stuff.
Yeah, Evita, we can't forget her. She wasn't just a first lady. She was a force in her own right.
Absolutely. She became this incredibly powerful symbol, tirelessly advocating for social welfare programs, establishing hospitals, orphanages, even championed women's suffrage, which Argentina finally achieved in 1947.
Wow, so much change happening. Perón's strengthening the workers' rights, Evita's fighting for the marginalized. It sounds like a revolution.
It was a huge social transformation. And then, of course, there's the economic side of things, the economic independence that Perón talks so much about.
Right, he was really big on that. How did he tackle that issue?
Well, he believed that true independence, it required control over key industries. He pursued a policy of economic nationalism.
Meaning?
He nationalized a lot of industries, things like the railroads, banks, utilities, brought them under state control.
I bet that was controversial.
Very much so. It was a huge point of contention.
Okay, so who was in favor of that and who was opposed?
Those who were in favor, they argued that nationalizing these industries would lead to a more equitable distribution of wealth and resources.
So the benefits would flow to more people.
That was the idea. It would also give the government more control, prevent foreign powers from, dictating Argentina's economic future.
That's like a take back control kind of move.
Exactly. But of course, the opponents, they saw it as a step towards too much state control, thought it would stifle economic growth and innovation.
They were probably worried about, like, inefficiency and corruption.
That was a big concern for them. They believed private enterprise was the real key to prosperity.
That's a classic debate. State control versus the free market. It never really goes away.
It's true that. So you've got these social reforms, the economic nationalism, but Perón was also really focused on industrialization.
Okay, so how did that fit into his vision?
He saw it as crucial for economic independence. He poured resources into building up domestic industries, offered subsidies, protectionist measures, to shield them from foreign competition.
It sounds like he was really trying to create an Argentina that could stand on its own 2 feet. But big, sweeping changes like that, they often come with unintended consequences, right?
Absolutely. Perón's policies, they did bring about some significant improvements for a lot of Argentines, especially the working class, but there were downsides too.
Like what?
Well, the economy, it did well initially. It eventually started to struggle. Inflation soared, foreign investment dried up, and social unrest, which had been pretty quiet during his first few years, it started to come back.
It seems like the very things that helped him rise to power were starting to slip away.
And then there's the issue of Perón's leadership style.
Yeah.
It became a lot more authoritarian as his time in office went on. He wasn't the same Perón who came to power in '46.
Power can be a corrupting force.
It can. He started clamping down on dissent, controlling the media, cultivated this personality cult around himself and Evita.
So he was starting to lose the support of people who were initially drawn to his message of, social justice and fairness.
Yeah, some people saw him as abandoning his original ideals, and they were not happy about it.
It's a classic story of, good intentions gone wrong.
It is. And by the early '50s, things were really coming to a head. The economy was in trouble, social unrest was growing, and the Catholic Church, once a strong ally, they turned against Perón. They condemned his autocratic rule and his attempts to control religious education.
So he's lost the church, the economy is tanking, and the people are getting restless. It's not looking good for Perón.
It wasn't. And in 1955, a military coup, supported by a lot of different factions, forced him into exile. His first stint as president was over.
Wow, what a dramatic fall from grace. It really shows you that even the most powerful leaders, they're not invincible.
No one is immune to the shifting tides of history.
It makes you think, right? How much can one person really change things, and at what cost?
Those are great questions. And Perón's story, it doesn't end there. He would eventually come back to Argentina and even reclaim the presidency in '73. But as you said, that's a whole other deep dive.
Well, I've got to say, this has been an incredible journey. It's amazing to see how Argentina went through this period of economic crisis, the rise of this incredibly charismatic leader, and the birth of a political movement that, it still shapes the country today.
It's a story packed with complexities and contradictions, and it offers some really enduring lessons about power, ideology, the constant struggle for social justice.
Absolutely. If this deep dive has piqued your interest, I really encourage you to explore this period of Argentine history further. There's so much more to discover, and it's a fascinating story.